Okay, with no further ado, I will start the introductions for Nane Lo and Lisa Craig. Nanea Lo and Lisa Craig. Please go ahead, my friends, and just start introducing yourselves because we are very excited to have you guys here and have a great presentation.
Thank you. Lisa, would you like to go first?
Well, your name's listed first. Go for it.
Okay. Sure. So good morning, everyone, and thank you all so much for clicking in to our presentation today. My name is Nanea Lo. I'm a community care worker with Leadership in Disabilities and Achievement of Hawaii, also known as LDAH or LADA. I have been with the agency for coming up on 3 years shortly, and I truly love what I do. Serving families, serving children with or at risk of a disability has truly become a passion over the years. I am a community care worker, and we provide vision, hearing, developmental, social emotional, and autism screenings to children now 0 through 8. Previously it was 2 to 5, but we were lucky enough to broaden our scope. And we also are the Parent Training and Information Center for the state as well as the Pacific, where we provide resources, tips, and advocacy tools to parents of children with special needs. And I'm very happy to be here with you all today. Thank you.
So my name is Lisa Craig. I'm a special ed teacher and working in the special ed field since 1999 here in Hawaii. I'm currently housed at the Office of Student Support Services. And as in that position, I'm working with a lot of different populations. I am so happy to be here and share some of the updates and answer your questions. COVID-19 impact services. Also, actually are doing IEPs now, more or less on a virtual plane. Go ahead with our presentation. Questions, please put them in the question and answers so that we'll be able to answer those questions right after our presentation. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for attending our presentation, COVID-19 and Virtual IEPs. This presentation is brought to you through a collaboration between the Hawaii State Department of Education, also known as HIDO, and Leadership in Disabilities and Achievement of Hawaii, also known as LADA. Today, we'll be going over what are COVID-19 impact services, how are services determined, how are COVID-19 impact services delivered, and how can you prepare for a virtual meeting. So what are COVID-19 impact services? They are temporary services provided outside of the school day that are aimed at getting your child to the level where he or she would have been without school closures. Within the first quarter, an IEP team meeting will be held to discuss the impact of COVID-19. In order to determine whether your child lost skills during the school closure from mid-March to the end of May, information from a variety of sources will be gathered prior to your child's IEP team meeting. That includes any school data, progress reports, reports from other service providers, and any information you can share. The IEP team discussion will focus on whether your child lost skills during the school closure, how big or small that skill loss was, and how it can be addressed. Loss is measured by how your child was doing prior to school closure and how he or she is currently performing. After analyzing data, if the IEP team determine your child did not experience a loss in skills, then they would be considered to have had no impact. If the skill loss is considered minimal, you and other IEP team members will decide if the loss can be addressed through the use of high-impact strategies and interventions through the Hawaii Multi-Tiered System of Supports, HMTSS process. The HMTSS process provides a systematic approach that coordinates resources to meet the needs of all students. If the skill loss is considered significant, you and other IEP team members will decide if it can be addressed completely by revising the IEP and by updating the present levels of academic and functional performance, also known as the PLEP, creating new or revised goals and objectives, or increasing the frequency or duration of related services or specially designed instruction. If not, the team will discuss the need for COVID-19 impact services. These are temporary services provided outside of the school day that are aimed at getting your child to the level he or she would have been without school closures. COVID-19 impact services are temporary and high-impact, specially designed instruction or related services that are delivered beyond the school day. These services can be delivered in, but not limited to, the following formats: in person or online through teacher-led sessions. These sessions can be delivered individually or in small groups before or after school.
How can I prepare for the meeting? You will be asked to share many observations, photographs, recordings, data logs, and any other information you have collected on any areas identified in your child's IEP. Be sure that you have the most recent version of your child's IEP for review prior to the meeting. School teams will consider all information presented by you when making educational decisions. If you don't have any documentation, please orally share any information you have. We suggest that parents create a concerns list to share with the team prior to the meeting. If you have any information on new needs that may have developed, please add that to the concerns list to share. If these new needs require a new service, the IEP team may need to conduct a formal evaluation to determine the extent for this new service. Before the meeting, you want to check and make sure that the device you will be using to access the meeting, whether it be a cell phone, laptop, or tablet, is fully charged and the charger is nearby if needed. Also check to confirm that your Wi-Fi connection is strong. Oftentimes, limiting the number of other devices using Wi-Fi in the home will help ensure your Wi-Fi connection remains consistent throughout the meeting. Find a quiet space in your home with good lighting where you can write comfortably. And lastly, dress as you would for an in-person meeting. During the IEP meeting, try your best to prepare yourself for the meeting 10 to 15 minutes prior to the designated meeting time. To ensure that the meeting is held in a professional, productive manner, it is best to check your emotions and try not to get overwhelmed or upset. As an IEP team member, you want to be a good listener and ask any questions that come up for you during the meeting. Do not hesitate to share your concerns list with the IEP team. Towards the end of the meeting, clarify the agreements that the team has come to and ask your care coordinator when you can expect the prior written notice, or PWN. HIDO's staff can record the virtual IEP meeting and parents can request a copy of the recording. Specific software will have to be downloaded in order for parents to view and hear the recording. If you choose to record on your own device, just be sure to give your IEP team notice. Quarter 1 deadline. There is flexibility with the Quarter 1 IEP deadline. It is critical that the team make decisions based on accurate and sufficient data. Therefore, if the data is not available, the team may collectively decide to wait until it is available to determine the impact of COVID-19. If you are concerned about big changes in your child's academic, functional, emotional, or behavioral needs, you can ask for an IEP or 504 plan meeting right away. If you have any case-specific questions, please contact your child's care coordinator. Thank you all for viewing our presentation. Aloha and mahalo.
Hello.
Yes, and then we did also have a few handouts to share with you all today. Corey, if you wouldn't mind bringing those up for us.
Yes.
Yes, but in the meantime, while Corey does so, please feel free to submit your questions to the Q&A and we will definitely be happy to answer them.
There was one question in the QA window that if the presentation will be shared with everyone or not. You could
I actually shared the PowerPoint and the slideshow with Spin already.
and it has been recorded. So on the website, probably is going to have a link later on. So other families that who could not attend to this meeting can watch again or can watch for the first time. Could you please go over the examples of data noted in the slide? Observations, pictures, videos. Is this up to the parent to contribute?
No, so it will be coming, some of it, if you do have those, it would be great if you could bring those because you've been working with your child at home. But the school, if your child has been in the school settings, we'll be also collecting. It's basically we want to collect information from different sources, so it's not all coming from one place. If you have them, it's great. If you don't have them, don't worry. Just share what you do know or what you've seen.
Lisa, your sound is coming on and off. Not too sure if it is the microphone.
So, like I said, we just want to make sure that we have from different sources information. So whatever you can contribute, it would be great. But the school, like I said, is going to also be collecting data to be discussed at that meeting.
Okay, another question is, if a student's recent reevaluation resigns from them from SPED, are they still eligible for impact services?
It depends, when were they, the recent evaluation, which means right now, within the past, since school started? Or is this done before the closures? So if you think about the whole thing with eligibility is showing that there is a delay, but if your reevaluation is showing that there are no delays, then there wasn't a skill loss. So it would be basically impact services are for IDEA and 504 students who are already eligible.
Slide said services outside of the school day. What do I do if the DOE says needs to be during the school day?
So that might not be COVID impact services, that might just be adjusting the IEP or using the HMTSS process in order to address those losses.
Yes, so I suggest when that parent is bringing up that need for a certain service, the service that they're addressing here, they really try to specify when they noticed that concern develop. Was it due to the school closures? Was it actually a result of having to learn virtually due to COVID-19? Or was it a concern prior? So then that would definitely affect when those services are provided and how they're conducted.
Yeah, because the questions prior, it was meant to be since they had an IEP during the shutdown. So, yeah.
I have those handouts if
when
you want me to share them. Just let me know which one you would like or which ones you want on the screen.
Okay, sure. Would you mind pulling up the IEP prep handout, please? Thank you. So this is one of the common handouts that we hand out to parents in LDAH as far as tips to prepare for the IEP meeting. And it is a 2-page long document, so it does go a little more in depth as to how to prepare. But of course, this was made for in-person IEPs, not necessarily virtual. And we do go into tips here about having all of your quote unquote working copies or documents for your child organized so that when you're in the meeting, you have everything orderly and in front of you and ready to go. And Corey, if you wouldn't mind scrolling down a little bit, please. We go into items that you may want to request from the school prior to the meeting for your review. And on the second page, thank you, we also go into tips for you during the IEP meeting, things like, again, being a good listener, tape recording your meeting, or in this case, requesting a recording of the meeting from the school staff. And this is also available on our website, so you can access this at any time. Corey, would you mind going to the next handout? Either one. Thank you. And I'm sure you've all seen this before, but we just had to bring it up again because it is such a great tool. It really walks you step by step through addressing the COVID-19 impacts for your child. And it really just has everything condensed into one place. This is on the SPIN Infographics webpage. And so is our last handout. Thank you. So this is a much more recent version of the LDAH handout, a little more condensed, but this is how parents can specifically prepare for virtual IEP. So things like how to be prepared prior to the call in regards to Wi-Fi in your environment, and just how to prepare you for what to expect for a virtual IEP, because it is new for many of us. So some parents have never done a Zoom call before. So this has some great tips as well, and it's also on the infographics tab. Thank you, Corey.
we can go back to the questions if you guys don't mind, because there are a couple of more questions in the QA. When planning distance learning with IEP team, do they have to consider the service minutes in the IEP when planning or no?
They will consider, but you also need to think about how much we can actually do during that service time. So your distance learning plan, how much specially designed instruction needs to be given, and when we can actually do that. This is where you come in very important, where your observation is how long can your child work in a virtual setting. Many of us cannot stare at our computer for 2-3 hours at a time. We can do it maybe for 20-25 minutes, then we need a break, and then we can come back. So that's something that you also need to share, is how long your child is able to focus in this setting with a computer, staring at a camera, looking at a screen. Mm-hmm. So it may be adjusted to be able to still address the goals and objectives to the greatest extent possible in those distance learning, as well as taking into consideration how long can they actually focus. Because not all of our students can focus for several hours and stare at a computer. So that's where you're going to have to really communicate with us about how long it is before your child decides he's just going to get up and move away, because that's when they need it.
So Beverly has a question that, what if my school hasn't contacted me about a COVID-19 impact meeting? What do I do?
You ask. You always have that power to ask.
Yeah,
Go
send
ahead
your
and
PR
reach out to
coordinator an
them.
email. Oh, sorry, Lisa.
Go for it.
But also make sure that when you're requesting that COVID impact services meeting, do so in writing. So you have that paper trail showing that you were doing your best to make sure that your child's IEP journey, if you will, was held in the standardized manner. Because as we did mention in our presentation, there is flexibility. There are thousands and thousands of children with an IEP right now. And as Lisa did mention, depending on the type of data that was collected during the closure, that's really going to depend on that's really going to impact the productivity of that meeting. And if some little more data needs to be collected in each area of your child's education, then the DOE does want to allow time for that data to be collected so that everyone can come together, the whole team is prepared with enough data to really make some impactful decisions moving forward.
There's another great question here. As a professional, I have many middle schoolers with IEPs that are forced to do virtual learning, which is not helpful, and they do not have any in-person schooling. How can we remedy that?
You really need to start opening that communication with the school, that if they find that this is not an appropriate setting to have virtual, and we move them back to face-to-face. Whether it be totally face-to-face or more of a hybrid, you would have to look at that. If there is, like if they start school and something happens where everybody has to move back to virtual as they disinfect classrooms and whatnot and then bring them back, that can occur, but that's where you have to start opening that communication up with the schools. And, this is not an effective learning tool for them. Not everybody can do a virtual session. Not everybody can work with just the computer. They need to have that interaction. So bring that up with the schools so that they know that that's something that. So we do have some schools that do have face-to-face hybrid or part of a day or totally depending on the needs of our students. That's something that they're going to have to really talk to the schools. Parents, please start that communication if you're finding that virtual is. And that's even if you opted in for the total distance and you're now deciding maybe that wasn't a good decision, go back, start that communication.
Thank you. My child has vulnerabilities and hasn't been in school since March. He has received ABA for 3 to 5 hours a day, Monday through Friday. His ABA therapist did an evaluation of his progress on IEP goals. Would that be useful and appropriate?
Yes, any information that you may have from various providers that you have out there, bring it to the school. That is wonderful information. It's something that the team should consider.
Absolutely, and you can also, for this parent, you can also invite that ABA provider to participate in your child's IEP meetings. Just give the school team notice so they can expect another person, but definitely, just as Lisa said, any outside data, any outside personnel who are involved in servicing your child, please invite them to their meeting and to your meeting and involve them in that process because they have a lot of rich information to offer.
What do we do with schools refusing to honor IEP plans during COVID and distance learning?
Wow, I've not heard that one. So
It's a tough
again,
one.
yeah, that's something you really do need to talk with the schools. If they are not responding in the chain of command, you go up to the district level. That would, if you called the state office, we would again put you at the state level. That is the chain of district.
Yeah, your audio is going off now again, but we could hear most of it though.
Yeah.
Just
So,
the last sentence, I think.
If the school is not being able, or they might need assistance, then you turn to the district. The district can assist.
Is minor skill loss the same as minimal skill loss? And what are examples of what schools provide in this case?
It depends on what the skill is. If it's something like possibly using a graphic organizer, where the child may have forgotten how to actually use it, then they may need to have reviews prior to any activity that is using a graphic organizer. So having that pre-learning time that they might be pulled to the side, have a little review session, and then join back into the group where they can now go in with the whole group. So some of those might be more. So they just need to have those reviews, how to use different tools, again, before actually using them.
I have a question from a parent that, is there a way to connect an ABA provider with your child's teacher? So the child was recently diagnosed. He or she is a preschooler and just entered into the early intervention program. Is that a possibility for the ABA provider to be connected with the child's teacher?
That if they're within the DOE and this is an outside provider, we would have to gain consent before we are able to communicate. And that's also with your ABA provider. They're not able to talk directly to somebody outside of their agency, or it's like having your regular doctor call the school. They can't do that without your consent, and it's usually a written consent. So we would have to make sure that those consent forms are signed prior to us opening. But if there's an IEP meeting coming up, you can always inform the school that they're coming. That way you can open that communication, and maybe at that time have all those consent forms signed and start that communication.
Did you know about an opt-in form that the parents need to sign before they can start planning for distance learning? It didn't look legit, so this parent didn't sign it.
Okay. Yes, there is an opt-in form for total distance. It is legit. It was actually created saying that, especially if it's special ed, that you understand that some services do not work in a virtual sense. So not all your related services could possibly be provided. An example is if they're working with the PT on strength exercises, the PT can't be in your home doing those, but can show you what activities can be done in the home. So it's a little bit different in how we could adapt some of those. So some things do not do virtual very well. So we can't do that. Some of your students who might have community-based instruction, going out into stores, going shopping, that doesn't work in a virtual sense because they can't go out into stores. They can't go and ask for assistance from the teller or the clerk. So that kind of a thing will not work in a virtual sense. So just have that understanding that if it's anything to do with the community, or maybe having to put a child into a stander, or being able to manipulate their hands so it grips something properly, it's going to be very difficult. We can explain it to you online. We can show you examples or videos, but then it falls on the parent to be able to do that because we can't manipulate over online.
Do 504s need a COVID impact plan?
If they do have any evidence of a loss, then yes, they could possibly have a COVID impact plan, same as IEPs. And you just need to contact your schools for those. Sorry.
All right. If my child has limited attention span, 30-minute max, but as I am working at home, I cannot be available to be his helper. How does a parent availability to support her child come into play, or does it?
It does a lot. And that's what we're finding some of the problems with nobody being able to help the child manipulate online systems. that's when we really need to talk about, is it possible for hybrid version? Because we can try and train the child to work online, but if they can't get the grasp of it and it becomes a frustration for them, then that's when we need to really start communicating that possibly this is not the right platform for them.
Is it a student support services plan that was sent to me through an email with no actual meeting, the same as a COVID-19 impact meeting?
No, that's totally separate. A COVID impact meeting is actually an IEP meeting in which we discuss everything, because if it is something that we can address either through the HMTSS process, where we just have more interventions put in, or adjusting the IEP, then we could do that at that time. If not, then it will have to be an actual plan, and you need to be part of that. A little bit different, so no, it's not the same.
Are in-home services such as qualified in-home EAs for medically fragile students included in the COVID impact services provided? And is a liability an issue? Some are experiencing roadblocks for in-home services.
Well, so for in-home services, right now, the only in-home services that we are providing are those that in the IEP, the setting is actually homebound. So it's a little bit different. So I'm not sure if, when you're talking about home services, if that's a homebound student or one that is just doing distance. Right now, we are only authorized to provide for homebound. That is the actual IEP. Anonymous, if you can put another question in whether or not that's an actual homebound, that's an IEP placement.
I will be on the lookout for that.
Okay.
BACB has a code of ethics. I think one of the participants comment on that, and she would check on that. Where would we get those consent forms?
So if it is for the DOE, the consent forms, you can get it from any of the schools. If it's for an outside provider, whether it be Kaiser or anything, any medical doctors, they normally have their own consent. Just get it from them.
Mm-hmm. Is it considered COVID impact if services were not able to be delivered, like full-time one-on-one services?
COVID impact services are only if there's a skill loss that cannot be addressed either through HMTSS, which is the Hawaii multi-tiered support system available to all students. But it's basically if there's any loss that's found from where third quarter ended until the ending of that fourth quarter, who started. Was there a loss? And if so, then we would consider COVID impacts.
Would my child's inability to follow instructions on the computer regarding navigation or other things be justification to ask for an aid for my child? So if the child's unable to follow instructions on the computer, pretty much that could be.
So if it's at if the child is at school, then you could, they would probably have somebody there to assist them. But if you're talking in the home, unless it, like I said before, the placement is homebound, they're not able to send anybody.
Why does there need to be a skill loss? These were hours the IEP team agreed to.
So the problem is COVID actually closed schools for everyone. It wasn't, we didn't single out anybody. And because of that, everybody had a loss. What the skill loss is for is to show that there was some loss that needs to be addressed. And that's what IEPs are for and 504s are for, to address any deficits that there might be. So at this time, we are looking for a skill loss, and if there is, then we address those. The loss of minutes because of the closure, at this time we were told it's at a no fault thing. We are not at fault that schools had to close. COVID's fault that schools had to close. Shops had to close. Everything more or less closed. Because of that, this is a no fault. What we do want to do is make sure we address any losses that might.
Do you need to have the first quarter IEP meeting prior to a contingency plan revision IEP meeting? Can you explain contingency plans and possible impacts or consequences?
So contingency plans are those plans where we come back to school. Come back, you may be on a hybrid or a face-to-face. All of a sudden, we have an active case of COVID at that school. The school is going to close maybe a classroom, or it could be the entire school to disinfect the entire school. At that time, we're going to do a what-if plan or contingency plan to address what are we going to do because we had to close that school for temporary. And if so, what are we going to provide? That's what those contingency plans. It's, again, one of those things that we don't plan. We're hoping that when classes open up that there aren't going to be any cases. But that's not going to be. That's going to happen. And when we do, we want to make sure that we are addressing and keeping our students safe, making sure our facilities are going to be clean and sanitized before we bring them back in. But during that time when we do close, we're not just going to say all services are these plans of what might be.
Okay. How can ABA services be delivered during this time via telehealth or during live online instruction?
I know that was brought up. I can't remember it off the top of my head. I'm so sorry. I may have to get back to you. I think, was it Tina? Was it? I will work on getting that information for you.
Okay, and yes, you are gonna have a copy of the presentation and the QA questions, so you can address those questions that were not answered right now because we're about to end the session soon. So don't feel that you are not gonna have your answer. So I'm going to try maybe like one or two more questions. So let's see. With skills being lost due in an IEP meeting coming up, would that mean my child would qualify for ESY, extended school year, to help fill the gap from having to go distance learning when they attend back to school?
Okay, so again, ESY has its own separate qualifications. So again, that's the what was lost, the rate of recouping that loss, looking at the, all those different qualifications. So it's not a guarantee. It's still going to have to be based on data like it has been in the past. So they may qualify for COVID impact services that might be provided during that same time, but it's not a guarantee that it's going to be called ESY. It's going to be when you receive the service.
Yeah. So yeah, the other comment was about, so what about compensatory services? Then can they get ESY through all the holidays to make up the loss?
That would be up to the team of when it's going to be provided. Not exactly when it might be. It could be before school, it could be after school. It could be, I know we had a few schools that actually had it during this past fall break. So it all depends. But it's up to the school and you to make that determination. Again, that's when you really need to be vocal with the schools, because if you think about your child's school day, how many more hours after school ends can they still work and still have to focus? If they're not able to focus even after the school hours, that might not be a good option. So that's something you need to talk about. How long can they actually focus and follow those instructions? After, an 8 to 2 day, can they go even further to 3? Not, then maybe we need to look at it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We can start wrapping up, and I'm going to, the other questions will be answered at a later time, and the presentation is already uploaded in the website, and in case if you guys wanted to access that before. So, Corey, you can go ahead with the slide. Thank you so much for all your questions. They're very valuable, and they solve a lot of questions that other parents might had as well. And if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to contact us. Go to the website and they have emails there that we can address your questions or further explanations about this subject.